Everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here for this very important dialogue. So I'm just going to give everybody a moment to grab a seat, and then we will continue this really important conversation with this very distinguished panel. So welcome. I know most of you were here for the earlier panel. If not, it was certainly fine to sort of hop in and join at this point. We're really happy to have you. I also want to welcome the folks, employees and students who may be joining through the live stream. I'm really excited to spend some time with this very distinguished group of leaders to talk about something I care a lot about, which is how to lead during times of difficulty and uncertainty. This seems like an appropriate topic this week in particular. So if we have not yet met, my name is Cynthia Lietz. I'm honored to serve as Dean at ASU's Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions. And when we talk about service in our college, we talk about what it means to put the needs of another above your own. Service is really about putting somebody else's needs above your own. And while there's all kinds of types of service that we prepare folks for at ASU and in our college, military service to me is the best example of leadership and service that involves putting the needs of another above yourselves. So I start by saying thank you. Thank you to all 5 of you for your leadership, for your service, for your commitment to our country. And I also want to recognize all who are here and have really adopted this heart of service into your current work and your futures. All right, so I think that's a great way to get started. We will have some questions on this topic. We will do similar as last time where we'll pause. So if you in the audience are feeling compelled to ask a question, we'll stop somewhere around 2:05, open up time for questions from the audience, and then we will wrap up at that point. So I'm going to ask our panelists to start here and sort of go down, introduce yourself to our audience today. And then I'd also like you to talk a bit about, as leaders, when you have to navigate difficult times, I can't think of a place that's more important than when working in the military sector, what it means to stay grounded, make solid decisions in the context of uncertainty. So I'd like to start by asking each of you to share one example of a situation where you had to lead when the context was particularly stressful. And just to situate the minds of the audience, I'd like you all to just take a moment and think. Think about a time that you needed to lead in the context of difficulty or uncertainty. And as you think about that, I'm interested to see the ways in which what we learn from our panelists today resonate with your own experiences. All right, so if we could start right here, that would be great.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Command Sergeant Major Jesse Townsend from the Intelligence Center of Excellence in Fort Huachuca. We're responsible for all military intelligence foundational skills training from across 8 enlisted MOSs, officer MOSs, warrant officers, and as well as we're responsible for the Defense Language Institute out in Monterey, California. I would really take this question, and as I think about difficult or really uncertain times, there's a lot of ways and a lot of experiences to go back, and I'll really focus on one that was an interpersonal relationship issue. In other words, I had 2 subordinates that one worked for the other, and they could not get on the same page to solve problems. And you're going to be there in this situation. These 2 gentlemen, they worked very hard for me. Both were very influential, very positive, very get-after-it types of leaders. But when it came to communicating with each other to solve problems, it was a nightmare. In other words, they could not get on the same page to solve the problem. And I would frame it in the sense of, each thought that they were doing exactly what they needed to do to take care of the organization and their subordinates. But their style, their approach, and basically really their lack of understanding of getting to the end became an obstacle to becoming a successful or a well-functioning organization.
It's such a great point because we think about all the things you likely face in your roles and people not getting along and personnel issues. I deal with that as dean. We all deal with those things, and it's not fun. So looking forward to seeing the themes that emerge and how we address those. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tarina Anderson. I'm the Garrison Command Sergeant Major at Fort Huachuca. And the Garrison, one of the best way to describe it is like we're sort of part city planners, part city managers. Sometimes my boss gets called kind of like the mayor, but we make everything about an installation that makes it like a small city, you know, your buildings and your roads and your water and electricity and your training areas. And the schools, we make all that come together and work so that it's a great place to go about your business and work and live and play. So my example is, I'll try to make it short, and this has happened a couple of times, and I imagine it may have happened to some of you, where you're not somebody's ideal leader. And, you know, a lot of times you'll hear leaders say, well, especially NCOs, we say this, you know, be the leader you wish you had. Well, but what if the leader I wish I had is not the leader that you wish you had or that you wish you had? Yeah, that's my example.
It's a really good point about how we influence and bring people along when maybe we're not exactly their choice of a leader or the style doesn't exactly resonate, and yet we all got to get the job done anyway, right? Yeah, really good. Personnel issues, leadership. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chief Master Sergeant Jason Aucoin. I am at Luke Air Force Base. I basically do the same thing that she does, but over at Luke Air Force Base. I am Colonel Abercrombie's senior enlisted leader. Got here about 2 months ago at Luke, prior operations group and F-16 maintenance. I've been in about 28 years and been stationed all over the world. My example would be recently, as we all went through the pandemic, I was on headquarters staff over at Air Education Training Command. And there was a huge challenge. Not just the pandemic was going on, but at the same time, we also had the civil unrest going out throughout America. And so our airmen throughout, a lot of them were put remote immediately, right? And then others were working alongside teammates. And so navigating both of those situations, we had to keep basic military training, including pilot training, but also technical training for our AFSC-driven career fields. And so how do we continue to protect? How do we continue to, through all of this uncertainty that airmen felt at that time, right? The world was saying shut down, and we were saying, no, we can continue to do this. And so how do you lead that while people are worried about their families, they're worried about their kids, and they're just worried about really themselves at that point in time. And so how do you calm the force during that time? So that was really a challenging situation.
Absolutely. Really important example that many of us faced, and looking forward to hearing how we came to a place of resolution. That's great. Go ahead.
Hey there. My name is Command Sergeant Major Jason Matlock. I am the Command Senior Enlisted Leader for Arizona National Guard. So I have about 7,500 Army and Air soldiers and airmen that we work with across the state. My example would be just coming back from a deployment, getting assigned to Walter Reed as a company first sergeant. And it's more of an emotional ride for me, coming back in the environment that you came back from, and now you have to switch, you have to hit that switch, and now you have to show compassion, empathy for soldiers. So I had 200 soldiers in my company. 90% of them were wounded warriors, meaning amputees, PTSD, TBI. So that's one of the examples we'll have a conversation about.
Wow, what a difficult thing to experience and very important as well. Yeah, that's great. Okay, one more.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Command Master Chief Eugene Smith. Intag Phoenix, Arizona, dealing with recruiting. Been in the Navy 21 years. Prior to that, I was in Annapolis, Maryland, the senior enlisted leader supporting the Naval Academy. So I'm looking forward to answering y'all questions. But for the leadership experience that I did have, which is on deployment in the 7th Fleet AOR, one of my junior sailors forgot to order crypto to be able to do the mission with our allies within a couple of days. So keep in mind, ISIC didn't have the crypto. Home Guard, stateside, didn't have the crypto, and their machine was down. So little did we know, we had to start thinking outside of the box of how we're going to get to the right answer of getting that crypto. We had another ship out there, and then I'll tell you how we came to a resolution after that.
Wow, so impressed both by all the introductions and the important things that you are doing, and getting a sense of the external pressures that emerge, the personal pressures that emerge, and even sort of our own stuff, the fact that as leaders, we're people too, right? So we have reactions to these things that we have to manage. So I'd love to start with you, Commander Master Chief Smith. If you could now talk about this period of pressure and sort of get yourself back there to what you were feeling at that point. And I wondered if you could share a bit about your own resilience. Resilience actually came up a little bit on the previous panel as well. So what did you do to maintain a level of emotional stability during that difficult time? And how were you able to make solid decisions despite your own both personal and professional stress at that moment?
If you actually look at it, a lot of people do not make rash decisions with a lot of chaos. So I had to bring myself to like, hey, let's get in here. Let's have a conversation. We got X, Y, Z. We can't get it. Now we got to look at our surroundings. So when we stopped and thought about it, we're like, hey, we got this ship here, and we potentially see, do they have it, by shooting out an email conversation. And by the grace of God, we was able to fulfill the requirement. And it just got us enough through the operation and the partnership that we were relying on to build that relationship with our foreign allies. So I'm thinking being calm and collected through all those stressful times ended up getting us over the hurdle. So that was our...
Can I push you a little bit on that? So tell us how. So how did you remain calm and collected when you were under such pressure and stress at that point? Do you remember some of the things you did to navigate that?
Well, one, my combat system officer, he was stressed, and he was getting, beat up by, the commanders, like, hey, why did you not have X, Y, Z? So I had to think about, like, hey, we have a mission. I had to think about the reason why I serve this country, and I'm in a leadership position. People are depending on us to get the job done, being in combat system. So I think just being calm in nature, try not to overreact when stuff get hard. I think I just relied on my instinct and say, hey, we got this, and we'll be able to get across the line.
Excellent. So focusing in on the mission, and then there were some instincts that were a part of it.
Yes,
great.
ma'am.
That's great. Thank you.
So we'll talk a little bit about my experience, Walter Reed, and kind of how I balanced that. It was tough coming from a combat zone, rolling into a first sergeant position, been a squad leader, platoon sergeant, had some leadership experience, but now you're in charge of 190, 200 soldiers that are wounded in some way or another. Then on top of that, you throw in families that are involved, right? Not used to dealing with moms, dads, wives, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, on an emotional, close level like that. So it was hard. It was hard. Had several conversations with the company commander. Hey, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have that switch that I can turn off when I have a soldier that I'm trying to get down the path of recovery and try to get home. And as sometimes soldiers do, they resist. But it's emotionally taxing. You've got to connect with the soldiers. They've got to have trust, faith in you that you're directing them and guiding them in the right direction. If you don't have that trust, it's useless. So you've got to be open. You're in charge, but you're also in charge of their wealth or their health and their fitness and their mental ability. So you have to have those tough conversations with them. One of the things that we did, because we really started to struggle with some of the families, was we actually created I just went blank, a caregiver group where we were bringing in someone close to the soldier. We were bringing them in, keeping them in the barracks with them, and allowing them to help support them and have that family connection as well on top of us helping and get them through the hardships that they were going through. Some soldiers demonstrated significant progress. Others didn't. Won't go into details, but had plenty of rehab failures and stuff like that when it came to abusive meds. Had a couple suicides. So it's an emotional event. Trying to turn that off. So turn it off when you go to work. Turn it back on when you go home. It's a balance that you struggle with. But I will tell you that experience led me to where I am today. And even as tough as it was, I wouldn't have changed it. It was probably the best command that I ever had. So.
Okay, so I love that point, both the creativity of solving the problem by bringing family members in. You talked about the importance of trust, but I think that last point is really worth saying again. Sometimes the hardest things that we face as leaders, we would choose to do again because they're the very things that caused us to grow the skills, the capacity, and the emotional stability, right, to do the things that we have moving forward. Doesn't mean we're happy that we're in that place or that the folks you were serving, that they were in that place, but that's what resilience is, growing through the difficulties. Yeah, great point. Okay.
I'll just kind of dive into that a little bit and start there. So what I was talking about before, the situation example is leading basic military training or tech training through COVID and civil unrest. And, our airmen, our soldiers, Marines, they want to do hard things. They join to do hard things, and they want to be challenged, right? And so, a difficult time for them, the uncertainty is how do you give them some certainty in an uncertain situation and then challenge them with hard things and allow them to do it. So what you asked to hear first was that I emotionally control my own emotions through my own uncertainty in a time that the world was uncertain, right? And so we talk about it a lot in the Air Forces, especially in leadership. You might go from an event where you're recognizing somebody for promotion to another one where you're dealing with somebody that's been injured, somebody that got in trouble, something you have to do non-judicial punishment. And so you have to learn how to manage your emotional temperature, right? And give yourself that chance between a meeting, because you literally can go from one to the other. And so you have to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And so you have your own life, your own family, your own uncertainty, you have to be able to manage that temperature of your emotion. And so for me at that time, I have family members that had significant medical situations, both in my house and outside of my house. And so that time was uncertain for my family. But I knew when I got in front of airmen that what they needed to hear was calm through the chaos and certainty that this would be okay. And that really can go for any situation that you're talking about. Whatever the change is, and it can be small change for our military members that becomes extremely uncertain for them because it's the first time they've gone through it. Or it can be major situations like a life-altering injury. And so how you manage the chaos and provide certainty and then challenge them with the way to go through it. And so that's kind of how I kind of did it and through over and over. And so, that's really it.
It makes me think a little bit about anyone who is afraid of flying, and you know how you get turbulent on the airplane, and then what do? You look over to the flight attendant to decide, are we actually okay? And if they're sitting there chit-chatting, you're like, yep, we're fine. So I loved your phrase, emotional temperature.
Did you say flight attendant because I was Air Force? Yes.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Actually, I'm quite sure no one up here is afraid of flying, but I must confess that is a thing that I navigate, so I'm having a little bit of my own reaction to this. Anyway, emotional temperature is a really good phrase for thinking about when times of stress and uncertainty, people are looking to leaders to decide, are we okay? So I'm going to push on. You said I had to manage my emotional temperature. How did you do that? How did you? Had stuff going on at home, you've got stuff going on at work. So what do you do as a leader to make sure that you are presenting that grounded front, even when sometimes you might not be feeling that way yourself?
Yeah, so I think what really you have to realize is that at that moment in time, it's not about you, because there's a lot of yous out in there that you're leading. And so for that moment and that time in front of them, it's not about lying, it's not being transparent or authentic, but it's realizing at that moment in time, you need to put yourself aside. You'll have time later on to get to you. It's just not right now. And what does the mission require? Because ultimately, in our situation, basic military training, if we would have shut down for 1 week, it would have took years to overcome that shutdown. We would not have the ability. We're already working at max capacity, right? And so having to stand up basic military training outside of Lackland, San Antonio, and now move it to an additional one to Keesler to offset that, those were things that airmen want to say, no, we can't do, because they've never seen it. And so how all of that chaos and what's going on in their life, how do you get them refocused? It would really turn yourself off for a moment and meet them where they're at.
Love that point. Thank you. Excellent.
So if we're talking about that emotional temperature, how you regulate yourself, I'll just keep it quick. The way that I dealt with the situation that I'm thinking of is I started going on really long walks. and I started running half marathons, like one a month. And I found that physical, energy helped to, it helped expend some of the emotional energy, and just a lot of self-reflection, a lot of. I found a couple of good friends that I could talk to and that didn't know anything about the situation. They knew some of the people because my MOS is really small, so they might have known some of the people, but they weren't there, so I didn't have that awkwardness of trying to go and talk to someone, even one of my fellow first sergeants when I was a first sergeant. Another thing that was really helpful, and I don't know if y'all have ever heard of the military family life counselors. I know there's some of those around, but we had a couple of those, and they would come by, and there was one in particular that would just come by, and she'd come in my office, and she'd sit down and close the door, and she'd say, "How are you doing today?" And so this might be getting into the next part of the question, but that helped me, again, just to reflect, self-reflection, just to know that, and to stay true to myself, to know that just because I'm not leading the way 1 or 2 or 5 people want to be led, that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, and I had one of my soldiers tell me that. First Sergeant, I think you're a terrible person and an even more terrible leader. And I said, okay, well, we still have to work together. And you still work for me, and I still work for you. And he said, okay, I just needed to get that off my chest. So that was another thing that actually really helped because then we understood each other, right? We understood that we got it out in the open, that we didn't see eye to eye, and that we didn't necessarily get along, but we understood that we still had to work together as a team.
So many good things in there. I love the point about exercise and how good that is for us, the ability to talk through the things we're going through, but also having a safe space for us as leaders who we can talk to where it may be safe and not spread across the team that you're trying to lead. And then just having open conversations. Really, really good. Okay, one more.
So with my situation, my first internal emotional response was I wanted to grab both of them by the ear, snatch them up and throw them in a room and start getting physical and fix the problem. But recognizing that that wasn't an appropriate action to take, and wouldn't have solved any problems. It really took a lot of just internal reflection and setting conditions to see how I was going to respond to this, and more importantly, what my response was going to do to enable them both to succeed. In other words, if I didn't take the time to handle this appropriately, see both points of view, get shared understanding, and create a way for us to go forward as an organization and solve problems, it wouldn't have been worthwhile. It wouldn't have meant anything, and that can be very difficult because you get in a position where sometimes you just want to tell people to get in the boat. We're going that way, and sometimes you can't afford to say that. You got to be very diligent about what you say, how you say it, and why you say it, and that can be extremely stressful. So the kind of things that I do is I step back, and anytime I'm faced with a situation of adversity or difficulty, is how can I turn this into a teaching opportunity? How can I share 2.5 decades worth of experience and turn that into something of value for better than just me, because it's never just about me. I do that a lot of times, but then to self-regulate, have a trusted agent, have an ally, have a friend that you can talk to. And I will tell you what became for me the best friend to talk through these problems was somebody who had no military affiliation, experience, or background, but they actually lead a construction company on the private sector. And they deal with similar problems, but with a different type of results. And so having those conversations enabled me to one, not worry about, is this gonna come back as something that, is there some kind of retaliation or retribution for sharing a story, but really it also they bounce ideas back and forth off of each other that help frame solving problems. Other things is I lean heavily on my family. I have an amazing wife that has been with me for 20 years of marriage. We met as specialists together in Hawaii, both serving in the intel community out there. And we have amazing kids, and they're doing amazing things. And so I can very easily go to that image and then go have a conversation, and that can make everything all right, no matter how bad it is. And when things get just a little bit rougher than that, I go to the garage and I start turning wrenches. So I'm an old car nut, and I love to work on old cars. That's my hobby, has been since I was a kid. And I'd rather turn some piece of metal into something useful, or turn a wrench until make something. Break it, fix it, maybe break it again, just keep playing with it until understand how it works. That's where I go.
Well, and that's something you can control, right? I actually really like and appreciate where you started, which I think was a really honest reflection on my first reaction was just put them in a room and solve the problem. And as leaders, we're human beings too. So when we're under pressure, there is a natural initial reaction. So some of what all of our panelists were talking about were the things that they do to notice I'm having a reaction: pause, breathe, run, exercise, talk to family, talk to a friend, work it through to then make the grounded decision that our folks need. I think it's a great transition to the third question, and now I'm just going to sort of open it up. Who wants to jump in and sort of respond to each other? I want to talk about your team now. So when you're leading and you're trying to be emotionally grounded, make solid decisions in uncertainty and stressful times, how do you keep your team motivated? I think about the pandemic example and how folks were also really scared for themselves, their health, their families, their loved ones. And so how do we, as we're managing our own leadership, also help move our team forward despite this context? Any thoughts from anyone on that question?
Yeah, I'll take that real quick. So when you talk about leading a team through stressful situations, the first time that they go through a stressful situation, whether it be in downrange or whatnot, it shouldn't happen then. And so when you're leading a person through stressful situations, they have to already have the trust in you that you've gone through something together. If you think of it like in a team aspect, any team, it could be high school, it could be college, it could be anything. Any team dynamic, you have to do reps at it. You have to have reps in stressful situations. So when that stuff hits the fan, you can rely on the person left and right. Colonel Abercrombie was talking about the Air Force moving to a unit of action versus what we call like crowdsourcing deployments, right? We would pick what we need and crowdsource it. And so that's very difficult downrange for our airmen to go through stressful situations. And it doesn't even have to be combat related. It could be stressful in, again, a lot of the stress we deal with downrange as a military member, everybody thinks about it about being bombs or conflict. A lot of that is just life downrange, right? Boredom, group interaction, leadership. Those are magnified. You want to learn about somebody? Put them together in a deployed environment. That is the most stressful situation you can do. You find out about them. And so that cannot happen at the end. It has to be beginning and get reps day over days and weeks over weeks, months over months.
Super interesting. Other thoughts on that topic?
I would say is, one, he's absolutely right. A team is built on shared hardship, facing adversity, and operating in ambiguity, right, all day long. But you gave an example a while ago when you talked about the flight attendant, right? Is leaders, sometimes you got to be that flight attendant. Some people need to be able to look up and see that you are the calm in the storm, that no matter how nasty the situation is, no how intense the fight is, that you're pointed in the right direction, you're moving at the speed of need, and you're solving problems for people. And when you're doing those things, that will inspire, motivate, and create the desire for those to move in around you and move in the same direction. And then that will build a situation, that will build an environment where maybe you do have a bad day, and that's fine for that leader to just not be on the game that day. But if you take the time and you invested in those things that Jason talked about, and then you wrap that around building a team that thinks that way, when you have that bad day as a leader, your team's just going to put a bubble around you and move out and solve the problem for you. And that's an amazing level of experience that you can get to.
Just to add, in stressful situation, I think you got to have that commander intent in your mind of the mission of that commander intent. I say that because you have to have those day-to-day conversations with your team about, hey, it's okay to be stressed out. It's okay to be able to know what those resources come from, because we all go through something each and every day. So my philosophy is, if I know the commander intent, it's bigger than this right here is bigger than me, bigger than us. So why not go through this together versus being all alone? So I think the commander intent, day in and day out, is will hone in on our sailors and soldiers.
Really good. Okay. All right. I've got sort of a visual in my brain of the team, your steady leadership, and it's got me thinking also about balance, which came up a little bit earlier. And so this next question asks you to talk a little bit about how military leadership often requires balancing toughness with empathy. So how do you both ensure the mental and emotional well-being of your troops in these complicated situations, while also maintaining discipline and readiness to act? Any thoughts about how you balance those things?
Yeah, I'll start off on that one. So I came in 1988. There wasn't a whole lot of concern about how I felt going through basic and AIT and getting to my first unit of assignment. It was get down, beat your face. I'm going to skull drag you across the carpet and show up at your next unit and just drive on. That culture, I think, in all the services has changed. And I don't see it as a change in softness that some talk about. I think it's more of caring for our soldiers and airmen and other partners, and understanding. I think there's more commitment to especially our junior enlisted, to ensure that they're taken care of. We're meeting the needs for them and their families, and I think we have to pay attention to that. You have to get down in the weeds sometimes, especially. Maybe not for us to get in the weeds, but our squad leaders, platoon sergeants, they need to know their people. And when things are going on, they need to bring those things to light. I think that's why we're seeing some of the tragedies that we see today. And I think we just need to communicate and have that openness and have those fair, honest conversations.
I'd say I'd agree. I came in '96, so not that long, but it didn't change much in those 8 years between us. I would also say you have to meet them where they're at. Every airman military member is different, right? Some want to be, they don't feel comfortable going to that space, and they don't really want to talk about it. They're focused on this. They weren't raised that way. In the Air Force, we call it comprehensive airman fitness, and we talk about pillars. And all of those pillars are, we talk about it as a combat enabler. So it's not like, hey, let's sit down and talk about your feelings because we want to be Dr. Phil, right? We do that because we understand that building that resiliency is actually a mission effectiveness, right? We understand in the Air Force we have very expensive things that just sit there and are static displays without airmen, right? And so without them, nothing happens. We also have a saying, we believe it, but we have a saying, right? We recruit airmen, we retain families. And so when we talk about, we can't go out and get a 17-year insert any MOS, any AFSC, we can't go get that off the street. We have to build it from day one. And so retaining our airmen and make it a place that is challenging, right? But they're cared for, and their families are cared for. It's important to all of us.
So I think you have to be curious about people. And so this idea of balancing empathy and toughness is something that I've struggled with as a leader because, and I remember having conversations with my dad about this. I said, I think growing up and then, growing up in the Army, growing up, and then when I joined the Army, coming into the Army, and there's all this talk about, I want my leaders, I want to feel like my leaders care about me. Like I always would hear people say that. And I was like, I always felt supported, and maybe this is part of it, my background. I always felt supported in whatever I did, and whatever I wanted to do for my parents and my family growing up. And I always felt like I was pretty good at just sort of, I guess, compartmentalizing maybe, okay, when I'm the school stuff, life stuff, and then once I came into the Army, there's work stuff and there's life stuff. And so I had to kind of learn, because I remember saying, like, I feel like I'll do my job, even, I don't need to feel like my leader loves me, and it sounds really weird to say, but I had to kind of learn that, I finally realized, well, not everyone is wired that way, and you have to, there's ways to, some people need that. Some people need to feel that the people around them, care, and they want to know what's going on in their life, and I'm just like, well, I don't really care if my leaders know what I do in my off time. My off time is my time, right? So maybe you're hearing a little bit of yourself in one or the other of these. Think about what kind of person are you, and just realize that not everyone is wired like you are. And so one of the things that I kind of had to work at was, and I started by telling people, if it looks like I just sort of blow past you and I don't say anything. And to include like the obligatory, how are you doing? Which a lot of times we say that and we just blow past people and we don't wait for the answer. And I had to explain to people, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I figure that you'll talk to me if you have something to say. But then I also learned to train myself to start asking people and to sit down with them and to be curious about them. This started when I was like a senior sergeant first class, and then especially as a first sergeant, I would go. It would really be easy for me to sit down in my office and just start working on memos and spreadsheets and all kinds of stuff and get sucked into that world. And so I had to make myself get out and about, and make a habit of going around and sitting, popping into offices and talking to people and going around post and meeting other people and sitting down and talking with them and being curious and just asking questions and letting them talk about what they do in their work and what they, what their family is like, and what their kids are doing, what their dog's doing. So I had to train myself to do that. So and I like to think I'm not the only one that maybe has struggled with that. So just think about, what kind of person are you? And now I've gotten to the point where if there's not a day, if there's a day when I get stuck in my office doing something, I just hate it, because I really like being out and about and talking to people. So it's starting small and making a habit of it.
Love it all. Such good points. Any other comments about toughness and empathy? All right. I'll reflect on just a couple things I heard. I really like the points about historically that there wasn't a focus to really be taking care of the folks working for us and advancing work-life balance, and that there was a shift somewhere between, I think it was 88 and 96, was it? So somewhere since then, something happened, and we're looking at it a different way. And it'd be interesting to even think about what was that shift and what brought that. I also really like pulling out then this point about that we have to train ourselves. We might naturally be able to excel at the toughness and might have to pull in the empathy. We might naturally have empathy and might have to pull out the toughness, right? None of us come to these roles with everything. It takes insight to say, okay, this is the thing I don't have, and I've got to practice it. I have to build up that leadership muscle. One last thing I'll say before we get to the next question is, we think about empathy as being nice, but that's actually not quite the right definition. Empathy is really about accurately understanding the position of another. And I think your point about my folks need something different, you've got to meet them where they're at and then respond as a leader, a situational leader who has the ability to adapt to different needs and styles. So it's not about being nice, although being nice is fine. I got no problem with that. But empathy really is about understanding, and that's what helps you accomplish your goals in these important and yet difficult circumstances. One last thing I want to reflect on. Did you notice how often the word family came up? I'm loving that. I'm loving how family is at the forefront of the brain, and even somebody mentioned a pet, with being a huge pet lover myself, and a lot of my own coping is not always talking to my husband when I get home, but spending time with my dog, right? So all those things matter. All right, so we'll probably make this the last question. Would love to hear from each of you on this one, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience. Through these circumstances, some of the stories that you shared today, I'd love for you to each to share one thing you learned, one lesson that came out of navigating a difficult circumstance that our audience can sort of take the benefit of learning from you about how that grew you as a leader. And anyone can start.
I think the biggest thing for us that's coming out of this is, one, you have to set the tone for your division, your command, and two, you got to be able to relate to everybody. You got to form some type of relationship. If you do not form relationships with your people, how are you going to be able to relate to them? For as showing them the avenues for the mental health, or give them the right resources when the time is needed. Because you should be able to relate to one person by the name of their dog, cat, mom, by name. You may not know everything about them, but you should have that conversation. So that helps me when I'm taking over a new command, get to know each and everybody and be able to relate. So that's me in a nutshell.
And that's empathy.
Yes, ma'am.
That's great.
All right. So two things for me. One, I can tell you none of us up here or the panel that was before us got to where we were by ourselves. It was a team effort, whether it was you surrounded yourself with exceptional people that had same like mind as far as finishing a mission or completing a mission. Everybody had their own opinions, but you still worked together to get to an end result to meet the commander's intent. My experience at Walter Reed taught me real quick in the first 90 days, I can't get so close as a first sergeant and being a leader in trying to lead soldiers, which what does leadership mean? The ability to influence people to do what you want them to do, right? You can't do that when you try to show too much friendship. There's that balance that you have to take. So what I would offer to you as probably soon to be down the road platoon leaders, you're going to be very close with the NCOs in your platoon, whether it's your platoon sergeant, you take a liking to a squad leader or what have you. Just understand there's a balance between you're in charge of that platoon, they're in charge of those people. And that balance has to hold fast, because if not, it gets murky and dirty really quick. So stay focused on that, and I think you'll do fine.
So I'm hearing that people matter, heard some about empathy, and I'm also hearing the importance of boundaries. As people matter and we care deeply about them as leaders, we do have to maintain boundaries to be effective. Great point. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just make mine real quick. It was, to me, what I figured out was you haven't arrived. If you graduate high school, like my kids are doing, they haven't arrived. You graduate college, you haven't arrived. You got that rank or that promotion, you haven't arrived. You get towards the end of your career, you haven't arrived. And so you're going to learn something in every single situation from every soldier, sailor, Marine, seaman, it doesn't matter, right? And so you could take something from everybody in every situation. And so during the COVID time and the civil unrest, and I learned a lot. I learned what I didn't know, where people come from, what they're feeling like. And so my sensors were up going, man, if at that point in my career, I'm now learning all of this, how come I didn't have that at that time? So now I'm on alert for those other things that I don't know that's going on, that it's going. So
I'm loving this point. So we care and get to know our folks because that builds trust, that allows us to lead them, and they trust when we direct when they're not even sure what the end goal might be in some cases. And when we get to know folks, we learn from them. If we are truly lifelong learners, if we don't engage with other leaders and folks we're leading, we miss out on those learning opportunities. So it's for them and it's actually for us. Yeah, great point. Okay.
So everything they said, and I guess specifically for me, I think what I learned is that, it confirmed one thing and then I learned another. It confirmed that I'm a firm believer in that God puts me in places where I need to be. And I don't always know why, and I can't always figure it out, but eventually I will. So it confirmed that, because then I faced a similar situation a few years later, and I felt like I was able to deal with it better, because the other thing I learned is that those going on the long walks and the running and the ruck marches and everything, no matter what the weather was, I needed that outlet. And then I needed that outlet of talking to people, and I'm not really much of a talker and touchy-feely kind of person. So then when I've faced similar situations, then it helped me to be more brave, I guess, more courageous about seeking out whoever that person was that was going to help me through that situation.
Yeah, I think for me, really, it comes down to just a couple things, and it's no matter how bad, how hard, how challenging the situation, or how difficult the interaction is between, dealing with people or solving problems, helping people solve problems. Is there will be tomorrow. There'll be another day, right? You've got, there's always, from an optimism standpoint, an optimistic standpoint, is there's another chance to reattack and solve a problem. You can have the roughest, most miserable experience, most miserable time dealing with whatever it may be, and there will be a tomorrow. Just keep on moving, right? Dory said, just keep swimming. You just got to keep swimming, and It's a great life lessons, right, Colonel Childs? But in what we do as our nation's defenders, I can always just turn a day into an amazing experience just by remembering this. We get paid to do this. We get paid to be at the point of friction for our nation. We raised our right hand to support and defend the nation. We volunteered to do this. There was no gun to our head, no force that required us to do this. And it is. I firmly believe that we are a part of the most valuable, most memorable, most value-added profession that exists in the world. And if you take that approach, that every day is going to be an amazing day, even on the tough ones. So enjoy what we do. Enjoy this, whether you're operating at 35,000 feet, or 1,000 feet below the surface, and anywhere in between. You get paid to do some of the most amazing things that people pay money to do. A lot of the things that we get to do. But it's again, on the toughest day, there's always an opportunity to hunt the good stuff, find what makes value in that experience, and enjoy it.
Very beautifully stated. So I'm about to sort of get ready, open up for questions, but I just want to make a quick comment. I am truly in awe of this panel. On a quick side note, in addition to serving as dean, I'm a faculty member who conducts research on resilience. And the research that I've conducted for about 2 decades says that there's 10 protective factors or strengths that help people overcome high doses of adversity. So resilience is a process of coping and adaptation that occurs over time, and these 10 things are the things that get us there. And right towards the end, I was about to say the panel demonstrated all 9, except I wasn't sure I had caught humor yet. Humor is one of the 10, and right at the end we got there. So that was spectacular. So without even knowing what the quiz was, you all passed with flying colors. So thank you for your incredible leadership and all of your lessons. Okay, questions from the audience. What would you all like to hear from this very prestigious group? I've got a couple over here.
Hey, good afternoon. Mitchum and Sylvester. So my question is, it's easy for those of us that have raised our right hand and volunteered our time to a life of service to understand and appreciate empathy. And like even the Marine Corps order just came out a couple weeks or days ago that just included empathy into the leadership traits. But how can we as leaders in this nation bring those around us to this new level, like this new leadership trait, in such a divisive time?
I'm going to harken back to what I said before about being curious, and then you said it. Meet people where they are. So I think if you're curious about people, you'll meet them where they are, and then you're more likely to influence them to see something differently.
I'll just add that, every person comes with a different background into the military, right? And, political, religious, goals, the military is filled with that. So what you have out in society, we have on the other side of the fence. And it's highlighted because we're doing hard things together every day and learning about them. This is not a come to work and go home, right? And so I think allowing people to have their opinions is important. We don't try to change somebody's opinion and say, hey, you can't think like that or do that, as long as it's not divisive to the overall team goal, right? And so ultimately, what you think is important, cool, but what we think and how we move forward is more important than that, right? And so through an election season or social stuff going on, and this isn't new for the military. We have led through this through multiple times, and we've set the example for society. And so for our airmen that come in and that, we build that core values, right? They're bigger than what you were raised values, right? We take the Constitution extremely important, right? And then we have UCMJ, that is the laws, and then another set of laws. Right? And so I don't think it's really hard for us, maybe airmen as they first come in, or military members as they first come in. And so how do we do that in society, if that was your question, like how those out of military can replicate that? I think we're leading through example. The best thing we can do in society is train up our military members and send them back out to society. Most of the people in military will not get to the ages and the times that you see up here and in here today. Most will serve a short period of time and leave. Well, I take it as a personal charge to send them out to society better than they came in, and that will impact society more than anything else.
Excellent responses. Thank you. Other questions?
Good afternoon. I just want to say that a previous Conjure member mentioned to my class that we should spend more time with people who invest time in us. Most of us are college students and wanting to be officers. As officers and parents, what are some advice you can give us to keep us grounded and mindful to the sacrifice those give to us for us to be successful?
I'm sorry, personally, I just didn't hear the question clearly. Could you say it one more time for us?
Yes. As officers and parents, what advice can you give to us to keep us grounded and mindful of the sacrifice those give to us for us to be successful?
And that's a tough one. I think it's just about, show that you care, right? Be sincere. It kind of ties into more what my answer would have been to the previous question is we're in a profession built on a system of values that enables us to do what we do regardless of what's going on in the spectrum of the world. And you can tie that back to any situation. You can tie those values to, families. You can tie those to leadership. You can tie those to followership, whatever it may be. But I just staying grounded is if you recognize that the military is much bigger than one individual, right? If you don't go seek glory, you don't go seek recognition. You just go do. In the Army, one of our core values is selfless service, meaning that I don't care who gets the trophy. I don't care if there is a trophy. This is more important than trophies, right? This is our nation's defense, and this is putting lives in harm's way. And when you kind of contextualize all those things, it really makes it easy to be humble and just go focus on getting the job done, whatever that job may be.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I think we've got time for one more. I know there were a couple more hands up. Several over here.
So how often do you guys have conflict within your groups, and how would you deal with the conflict while you're leading?
You mean with us, like conflict?
No. With let's say your soldiers you're in charge of.
If you look at conflict, right, you're going to have conflict on a day-to-day basis, right? You're going to be day one in there, may ask the new leader in your company or your battalion, they may not like your leadership style. And there's going to be some conflicts where you're may have to go behind those doors and have those tough conversations. So that's when that tone is set immediately on the expectation between yourself and the other person for we all can complete the mission. That's the ultimate goal, because I can guarantee this panel you cannot tell us that they have not had conflicts with their counterparts or whoever that case may be. So it's going to happen. It's human nature, and that's the best advice I get. You're going to have those tough conversations.
Yeah, what I'd add to that is be consistent. You can tell one service member one thing and then change your answer to someone else just because you're having a good day or a bad day. So stay consistent in your messaging, and you're going to have conflicts. Those are going to happen. Don't do knee-jerk reactions. Think about your actions before you process, and they'll work out, the best way you can. The one thing I'll add is go Army, beat Navy.
One more as we wrap up?
No, ma'am. I just like this gentleman over here raised his hand for all three. Can we do it real quick? Allow him to ask that question. I just saw him do it 3 times.
Let's do it.
It's called empathy. I want to be empathetic.
I appreciate that. Good afternoon, Cadet Simpson. My question is, we talk about confidence and that too much can lead to arrogance and too little can lead to looking incompetent to others. And in an organization that almost demands confidence, how do you maintain your confidence as a leader in the military?
So I'll just give you what one of our war colleges, it's not war college, weapons school, right? For basically our Top Gun pilots, right? They call it humble, credible, approachable, right? Be humble so your arrogance doesn't over-dominate your credible, right? But be approachable enough that somebody wants to come to you because they see your credibility. If you have all those 3 together, any one, we were talking about the chair analogy, if you're not humble, credible, or approachable, if you're missing one of those, then you're going to fall into a situation that you said. But if you have those 3, then you're balanced, and you can be approachable, you can be credible, and you can be humble.
Humble, credible, approachable. I think that's a great place to wrap up, and I'd just like to say to our panel today that ASU salutes your service. Thank you for giving us your time, your expertise today. We are deeply grateful for your service. Thank you.